they never found the entrance into the Great Bay. But in this drawing, we can see sand dunes going all the way from the ocean all the way to the bay. There are little bays over here, Mission Bay, Yerba Buena Cove, the Islay Marsh, here's Hunter's Point, and there were tidal marshes all along the shoreline. San Francisco Bay, 90% of all the original tidal marshes, saltwater marshes, that purify the bay have been destroyed for development. But we are finally getting to the point where we're actually restoring tidal marshes throughout the bay. We need more federal funding to do that, and God knows we're not going to get it from the Trump administration. This is the way San Francisco's shoreline would have looked before the arrival of the Europeans. So you can see grizzly bears, there's a beached whale, and there's some beached whales as we speak that two of them died, and there's photographs of them in this morning's Chronicle. The California grizzly bear, which is now extinct, was very prominent. You can see all the tidal marshes, great herds of elk and deer, and also overhead you had great flocks of pelicans and geese. This was one of the richest ecosystems on the face of the earth because of the combination of fresh water, salt water, oak woodlands, coastal prairies, scrub, and the native people. These sketches, by the way, come from the book The Ohlone Way by Malcolm Margolin. Obviously, there were no photographers back in those days, so these are sketches. But they would live next to freshwater creeks. There were between 10 and 20,000 native people living in the Bay Area when the Europeans arrived in 1769. We have learned that when the Europeans arrived, mainly the Spanish, their goal was to Christianize these heathens because they did not believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and so they rounded them up, brought them into the mission, or into the Presidio to do labor. They contracted European diseases that they had no immunity to, and by the thousands they perished. Measles, smallpox, and they were pretty well wiped out very quickly. And if they resisted, they could have been killed by the military. So it's a very sad story. It's kind of analogous to the way our native plants and our native plant communities are threatened by invasive exotic species that come from elsewhere that don't have any natural predators here. And they have a tendency to rapidly overrun a diverse native plant community. I mean, it's not just happening here in California or in San Francisco. This is a worldwide problem. If you go to Australia or South Africa or South America, you'll see that California native plants are invasive exotic species there because their natural predators are here in California. And recently I looked up on Google how many native people actually perished because of the influx of Europeans, either by conquest or by disease. And in the entire Western Hemisphere, that includes North America, Central America, and South America, there is possibly as many as 50 million Native Americans who perished. That's pretty frightening. That's how many people died in World War II. The oldest natural features that we see in San Francisco are the rock formations. This is Franciscan Radiolarian Chert at one of our 32 natural areas, the rock outcropping at 14th and Ortega. So these rock formations were formed, they're sedimentary rock that was formed at the bottom of a prehistoric ocean. And these are fossilized one-celled marine creatures known as radiolaria. In the background we can see Grandview Park, which is another one of our 32 natural areas under the jurisdiction of Rec and Parks Natural Resource Division. We had to fight for these rocks. It had to go through the process of eminent domain, where the owner of the property was paid fair market value as determined in a court of law to acquire this site. So we have regular work parties here. We go up and pull weeds, battle pampas grass, control Earharte, recta, and oxalis, both of which come from South Africa. These are the sand dunes as they looked in 1899. This is a view from Golden Gate Heights, where that rock formation is situated today, and we're looking west to a young Golden Gate Park in the background. You can see the cliff house sitting right there, Adolf Sutro's cliff house, that would burn down in 1907. This is Carl Larson's chicken ranch. This is Noriega and 19th Avenue. Noriega, 19th Avenue. Much more peaceful in those days. You can see drifting sand dunes and stabilized sand dunes. The stabilized sand dunes are called swales, where you have a high water table, and dune plants with deep roots are able to latch onto the high water table, and as the vegetation grows, it slows down the advancing sand dunes. Carl Larson, who owned the chicken ranch, gave a lot of land to the city when he died in 1928, where Charlie Sava Pool is. That's Larson Park. We used to call Charlie Sava Pool Larson Pool, named for Carl Larson. But he gave lots of property to the city because he adored the children of San Francisco. It's called the Little Dane.
Greg, can I ask some questions as you go?
I can hardly hear you.
I was wondering, back there you said that swale. Where is that swale now?
Just beyond the Shriner, where the Shriners Hospital used to be. But I mean, it's all developed now. That's 1899.
But it looked like a low point, and I don't recall a low point there.
Well, they leveled everything. They just leveled it. You know, you had 100-foot high sand dunes, and they just leveled them, or they used it for filling in the bay. This is a 1910 photograph from an original glass negative taken by Willard Warden, looking west across the sand dunes of the Sunset District. As you can see, they weren't a barren sand waste. They had a great diversity of native dune plants that were adapted solely for living in the sand. And those plants attracted large numbers of butterflies, birds, mammals such as mountain lions, grizzly bears. Out by Ocean Beach at the foot of Irving Street was a neighborhood that was called Carville, made up of old abandoned streetcars and cable cars. Some of these buildings are still there, but they've been covered over with shingles or stucco. But I've been inside of a couple of them where they had two Castrol cable cars side by side. So that's Golden Gate Park in the background, Fort Miley Way in the background. And this would be what is now the Great Highway. This is an inner dune freshwater pond out in the Sunset District, before the Sunset District was developed. Another Willard Warden photo. Willard Warden was a naturalist who would go out and photograph the sand dunes and the native plants. I think he probably knew that they were probably in their last years because development was approaching. Now, where did all this sand come from? You know where all this sand? It's granite sand.
Sierra Nevada mountains?
Yeah, it started in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and wind, rain, erosion, and later hydraulic mining caused sediment from the granite rocks to flow down the San Joaquin and Sacramento River into San Francisco Bay, where tidal action washed it out through the sand, out through the Golden Gate, and then the northwesterly prevailing winds blew it across the tip of the peninsula. Here we are looking from the top of Strawberry Hill, which is the highest point in Golden Gate Park, where Huntington Falls is, Stowe Lake, and we're looking to Mount Sutro and Mount Davidson in 1886. This is the inner sunset. Here's 9th and Judah right there. That's you catch the end Judah right there. Then you go down here and you wait in line at Arizmendi, one of my favorite pastry places. We all know Arizmendi, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Good. This is Lincoln Way, which was then called H Street. And you can see the tracks of a steam train that ran from Haight and Stanton all the way to Ocean Beach. And if the sand was blowing, many times the passengers would have to get out of the steam train and shovel the sand off of the tracks if they wanted to get to Ocean Beach or they wanted to come back to Haight and Stanton. Oh yeah, Christopher. If you look at this picture, Mount Davidson, you see that little nub right there? Those are the rocks where the Nuka reed grass is today. This is before the trees were planted by Adolf Sutro, although there are some trees that were planted here, possibly by the Spring Valley Water Company. This is looking across from, this is 7th and Lawton. The Garden for the Environment would be right here. This is 1921, and we're looking to Grandview Park and Golden Gate Heights, where sand dunes actually went up and over an 850-foot mountain range. This is the highest example of drifting sand dunes going up and over a hill that we know of in the entire world. 850 feet, right here in San Francisco. And then the sand would come down and flow right down into this valley or canyon where Laguna Honda Boulevard goes today. We'll talk, when we talk about the lakes, we'll talk about Laguna Honda, which is a native lake. Here's this, that's my grandmother's house right there. So when we were kids, we would play on these sand dunes just roll down the hill. I remember I hit my brother with a rock. And he had big stitches.
Shame on you.
Bad boy. This is the same view from Mount Sutro today. These are the Harney Apartments, now called the Sunset Towers, built by the same guy who built Candlestick Park, Charles Harney. You want to see the difference again? 1921 and today.
Where's your grandma's house?
What's that?
Where's your grandmother's house?
Well, my grandmother would have been right up in here.
Oh, okay.
Is it
She
still
was
there?
at 8th and Moraga. Windsor Terrace, kind of an upscale area, but when my grandfather died, she moved to a much smaller house on 14th Avenue. But we'd go there and watch all the football games, all the opening day. I would go to the Giants games with Sadie, my grandmother, and on her 80th birthday, her name was on the Candlestick Park scoreboard, wishing her a happy birthday. Now we're still following the sand dunes. This is Sanssouci Valley, which in French means without care or carefree. This is the lower Haight area. This would be Fillmore Street right here. Fillmore and Herman. So the photographer is standing right where the U.S. Mint is at DeBosin Market, looking back to Buena Vista Park would be up here. This would be Alamo Square, and way in the background you see Lone Mountain. This photo was taken in 1862, and you can see Sanssouci Lake, where water was collected that flowed all the way down from where the Panhandle is, and then all the way into Mission Bay. And they built a dam here to collect the water for irrigation. Now we're looking at the exact same view, 1862, 1905. So you can still see Lone Mountain in the background, part of the University of San Francisco campus today. Here's Herman Street. So we have obliterated, whoop, wait a minute, go back. So we've obliterated our natural heritage, but this is our architectural heritage. And most of these Victorians are still there today because after the 1906 earthquake, when the fire burned San Francisco for 3 days, the fire never got this far. So the lower Haight, the Haight Fillmore area, has some of the most wonderful Victorians in San Francisco. Now, speaking of Lone Mountain, this is Lone Mountain. As I said, it's part of USF today. And this is the way it looked after the great snowstorm of February 6, 1887, which dropped 7 inches of snow in San Francisco in the western part of the city. That is Archbishop Alemany's cross at the summit. And this is part of Oddfellows Cemetery. There were 4 cemeteries that surrounded Lone Mountain, which included Oddfellows Cemetery, Masonic Cemetery, Calvary Cemetery, and Laurel Hill Cemetery. The columbarium is a remnant of Oddfellows Cemetery. Kaiser Hospital is built on top of Calvary Cemetery. Laurel Village is built on top of Laurel Cemetery. And so, you know, they're always finding remnants of coffins. Sometimes they find bones there. This is more of that same snowstorm. We're at 20th and Shotwell Street in the Mission District. All of these houses are still there today because the fire only got within a block of these houses. It burned everything from 20th Street in the Mission all the way to Van Ness Avenue. And the Financial District in North Beach, all of that was wiped out. But this part did survive.
Greg, the front yards of those houses are gone now, right?
Yeah, what?
The front yards that we see today don't exist, right?
Well, I'm going to show you the exact same spot on the next picture, so let's look. The automobile has ravaged everything. Because, of course, step one, when you buy a house like this today, the first thing you're going to do is call for the bulldozers to eliminate the front garden and to put in a garage. And, you know, back in the old days, I've talked to a lot of old people. I mean, I'm old now, but when I was in my 20s, I'd go and interview people at Laguna Honda Hospital, and they would show me their family albums, which I would copy, and people all had front gardens. They didn't have garages. And so everybody would talk over the front gardens. Mrs. Jones, the 8 kids would come by. Everybody knew everybody. Now everybody's got electronic garage door openers. You don't even have to know who your neighbor is. Here's the same spot today. So in most cases, now I have to admit this picture was taken around 1979 when I went around and took pictures of the same spot, before they had Google Maps, where you could actually go. But it looks like there's no garages in those in the front of those houses. See? The retaining walls are there. But of course you can't walk down the sidewalk because the sidewalks are now parking lots as well. So, you know, we're adding millions and millions of cars. You watch any commercial, you watch baseball or you watch the news, and all they tell you to do is buy more cars. And of course, if you buy a car, you will be the only person driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. My girlfriend has a car, and we have fights all the time about cars. All right, if you don't like it, get out and walk. Well, but we do get along in some aspects. But she gets the American Automobile Association magazine every month. And believe it or not, they always have these fantastic pictures of all these places that you can drive to, like Yosemite or Yellowstone, and they never show a car on the front cover because it would degrade the beautiful photograph. So we're still tracking the sand dunes. This is the Richmond district. around 40th and Balboa, as it looked in 1912, you can see it's just lush with dune vegetation, dune scrub vegetation, Artemisia californica, California sagebrush. You can see Erysimum franciscanum, the San Francisco wallflower in there. And it looks very similar to the slope above Baker Beach today, which is part of the Presidio managed by the National Park Service, which does state-of-the-art habitat restoration. The National Park Service has been a blessing for the Presidio. We were so lucky to get the Presidio. There was one stipulation by the Republicans, though. It had to be financially self-sufficient, and it is financially self-sufficient.
Can you, that Richmond picture before?
I can't hear you too well.
That Richmond picture of the dunes?
Yes.
Can you go back to that?
Yes,
What's that
I can.
street in the background?
Now, all of these pictures, by the way, if you want to look at them more clearly, go to OpenSF History, because I have donated my collection to the Western Neighborhoods Project, and we're scanning them and putting them online. So you go to the map, you zero in on the map, and you can go to anywhere. This is from a book of photographs on the Sutro Estate property by Baldwin and Howell, the real estate company that subdivided the Sutro property after Adolf passed away. So they were showing all of these lots that were going to be developed. This is the view looking from Lone Mountain down to Geary Boulevard in 1898 to the Presidio, showing Camp Merritt, which was a Spanish-American War Army base. And it was between Arguello and 4th Avenue. And many of these troops, they would disembark and they would go to the Philippines in anticipating fighting the Spanish, but by the time they got there, they were fighting the Filipinos because the Spanish had basically given up, and the Filipinos thought, well, now we're going to be free, we're going to be independent, thank you, America, for helping us fight the Spanish. And the Americans said, no way, now we're going to control you. And so the Filipinos fought the Americans. The liberator of the Philippines, the hero of the Philippines, is Emilio Aguinaldo, who led the revolt against the Americans. But he was captured by General Frederick Funston. But that's another story. And these are some of the cemeteries. This is right where Kaiser Hospital would be today. So Masonic would be down in this valley. Here's California Street over here with Laurel Hill Cemetery in the background.
Wow.
And that's Senator Broderick's marker. He was killed in a duel with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of California, Chief Justice Terry, right at Lake Merced. But that's another story also. So these girls are posing in their Sunday best on a stabilized sand dune hill. And in the background, we can see Van Ness Avenue, Polk Street, and Larkin Street. This is Nob Hill, 1868. This is a Muybridge photograph. This is from a postcard. We're going to talk about the grasslands, the wildflower fields, the coastal prairies that existed in San Francisco and in some cases still exist. This is a postcard saying, picking wildflowers at Ingleside. And of course the Ingleside district would be like where the Ingleside Racetrack, Urbano Drive is. Ocean Avenue and Junipero Serra would be about where this image would have been taken. And it's just covered with lupin. So there just must have been butterflies all over the place, because lupin is an important larval food plant for many butterflies, including the now federally endangered Mission blue butterfly. Here's some of the wildflower fields that still exist. Christopher, where's this?
Howell Phelps.
Huh?
Howell Phelps.
Very good. This is Palou and Phelps, wonderful wildflower field. You can see All Hallows Church in the background, which is like the religious monument in the Bayview Hunters Point. And these are gold fields and poppies. And there's a train tunnel that goes right underneath Palou and Phelps. The whole hill is known as Mount St. Joseph. This is Douglas Iris on off of Marietta above O'Shaughnessy Boulevard. This property is owned by the Water Department, the Public Utilities Commission, under the jurisdiction of Hetch Hetchy, because there was a plan at one time to dam Glen Canyon and make it a big reservoir. So the property is still owned by the Public Utilities Commission. And a lot of us still worry, if it's not under rec and park, there is always the potential that this could be declared surplus property and could be sold off to developers. If Rec and Park wanted to acquire this site, they would have to pay fair market value to the other city department. That's in the city charter, which I don't think is fair. I think for the public good, we should allow it to be moved from one department to another for $1. By the way, this picture was taken about 1985, and poison oak has overrun this Douglas iris since. Native plants can become weedy as well if their natural predators are no longer in the food chain. So since there's no more grazing animals in San Francisco, the elk and the deer are gone. We killed them all. Unless you bring in commercial goats, native plants like poison oak, blackberry, bee plant can all become weedy themselves. This is some beautiful Clarkia rubicunda on Bayview Hill. Its common name is farewell to spring because it blooms late in spring and early summer. It is an annual wildflower, and you can see the importance of the Clarkia. This is the sphinx moth caterpillar. It's the mother moth laid her eggs on the Clarkia, and now the sphinx moth caterpillar has hatched and is now eating the Clarkia. And this relationship has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. This is an Anna swallowtail caterpillar eating angelica. And this was on Bernal Heights. I took it around 1980 or so. And here's an Anna swallowtail butterfly sucking nectar from lomatium. Now the Anna swallowtail is one of the few native critters that has been able to adapt to an invasive exotic species. The lomatium is rapidly disappearing, and it has amazingly adapted to fennel. And God knows there's enough fennel out there. So when we go out there and whack down fennel to preserve native plant communities, we always keep our eyes open to make sure that we're not going to whack a Anna swallowtail caterpillar or a butterfly.
Is that different from the pipevine swallowtail?
No.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
What was that?
Is it different from the pipevine swallowtail?
Yeah, oh yeah, very much so. Very much so. This is a bay checker spot, which is a federally endangered species, I believe. Is that true, Christopher?
Yep.
And it is on Ranunculus californica,
Buttercup.
California buttercups. And this is taken in McLaren Park many years ago. Now we're going to look at the lakes and the creeks, the freshwater areas of San Francisco. This is a view from Russian Hill looking down into Cow Hollow, as it was once known, to Washerwoman's Lagoon. And we're looking to the Presidio in the background. You can see sand dunes. This would be Chrissy Field today. These are the indigenous sand dunes. And Washerwoman's Lagoon was a freshwater lagoon, and it was ideal for elk and deer. And then when Western people arrived, they would use it for drinking water, and then they would use it for laundries, so it rapidly became polluted. And then they established slaughterhouses and dairies in the Cow Hollow district. A mayor of San Francisco, Mayor Burr's son, died of cholera because he drank water from Washerwoman's Lagoon that had been badly polluted. So Mayor Burr got rid of the slaughterhouses and the dairies in Cow Hollow and moved them out to where Butchertown is and Visitation Valley. So here's another view of Washerwoman's Lagoon. This would be just before it was filled in. This is from Pacific Heights, and we're looking north to Fort Mason, drifting sand dunes, coastline oak trees, native oak trees on Pacific Heights. This is the Aileen Mansion. There was a big fight that I remember in 1965 to save the Aileen Mansion. And it was demolished, and now there's a park, Aileen Park is there, in the Marina District. And the Octagon House is right there, which is right on Union Street today. This is Mountain Lake as it looked in 1899. And we're looking west to what was the Public Health Hospital and the Marine Hospital. And you can see horses grazing. It's all sand dunes, and you can see some eucalyptus have already been planted. Now the National Park Service has done an incredible job in restoring this, what remains of this creek. Because of course what happened is when they built the roadway to the Golden Gate Bridge, they filled in large amounts of Mountain Lake and just dumped the debris into Mountain Lake. And then when cars started running on the roadway, the oil and the gasoline dripped down into Mountain Lake. Also asbestos from the brake drums got into Mountain Lake. So they had all this contamination. And then people would leave their turtles there when they moved. So you had invasive exotic species. And the National Park Service dredged the bottom of the lake of all the contamination, most of it, and have done a great restoration project there. You recognize this spot? Not you, Christopher, because I know you know it.
That's Laguna Honda.
Yeah, that's Laguna Honda. That is what is in this. It's a native lake that in this picture in 1862. Ignore that date. That's a filing number by the Spring Valley Water Company. But this was when the Spring Valley Water Company, a private water company, that's all there was in San Francisco, just private water companies, until the San Francisco Water Department was created in 1930. But this is Laguna Honda being converted into a reservoir for drinking water. And it is no longer used for drinking water. It is now used for emergency firefighting water. I do not believe any water is pumped into it anymore. All the water that accumulates in that lake comes from a high water table. Now, how did this lake form? This lake formed because, well, for one thing, if you go back 12,000 years ago, sea level was 350 feet below what it is today. You could walk to the Farallon Islands, and native people were here then. They've been here for 18,000 years. They came across the Aleutian Islands when Siberia and Alaska, you could walk right across because sea level was 350 feet below what it is today. They came all the way down, and then as sea level began to rise through natural warming, and now it's speeding up because of human impact, the sand dunes came inland, damming creeks and rivers that ran through this, that carved this canyon Laguna Honda Canyon, creating two lakes, Laguna Honda and the waste pond, which was located where the Christmas tree lot is at 7th and Lawton. Now that Christmas tree lot is most likely going to be developed. It's been declared surplus property by the Unified School District. It's school district property, and they're looking for developers to develop it. So here's Laguna Honda in 1862. Here's the same spot today. Well, 1985. Focus, focus, focus.
That's it.
And you can see that trees now dominate the landscape. All of these trees that you see, although there are some native oak trees still, the eucalyptus, the Monterey pine, the Monterey cypress, are not native to San Francisco. They were all planted and then they spread by dropping seed and advancing over the landscape. And when they advanced, they destroyed the native plant community. But there is an area behind Laguna Honda. You know, the people who work at Laguna Honda Hospital don't even know that that hospital was named for this lake. Because I talk to them, because I ride the 44 and the 43 bus every day. But anyway, behind Laguna Honda is an area where trees were never planted by either Adolph Sutro or the Spring Valley Water Company. And because of that, this is one of the richest natural areas in San Francisco. But it is owned by the Water Department. It's not owned by the Recreation and Park Department. So again, there's always this possible threat that if people keep screaming, we need more housing, we need more housing, and God knows the population of the world is increasing by 1 million every 4 days, of course we're going to need more housing. And you know, what's going to happen is continue to contaminate your own bed, and you will one night suffocate in your own waste. I mean, it's insane, man. That's what Chief Self said, who Seattle is named for. But this area is just amazing. And if you walk back there, you're not supposed to go back there. It says no trespassing. But we do habitat restoration back there. The Water Department gives us permission. And this is, you can see Indian paintbrush, native Dudleya, succulents, Artemisia californica, soap plant. It's extremely diverse. I mean, you expect an indigenous person to come out of the bushes or a mountain lion to chase you. It's so primeval. But the weeds are penetrating, you know. So you have to battle the weeds if you want to preserve this.
What's your least favorite weed?
Right.
What's
Now,
your least favorite?
I can't hear you very well.
Oh, okay.
What's your least favorite weed? Was the question. What's
What?
your least favorite weed?
My favorite weeds, I hate
Least
them.
favorite.
I have nightmares about them. Oxalis from South Africa is probably the worst because it expands by bulbs underground. And if you don't get the bulbs, you haven't killed it. I mean, right now it's blooming all over the place. It's that yellow flower that you see blooming all over the vacant lots and in people's gardens. Also, Earharte erecta, which is also from South Africa. The reason that we got so many bad weeds from South Africa, Australia, parts of South America, and the Mediterranean is because we have similar climates. And those plants can adapt to our climates very readily, but they don't have any natural predators here. So they serve very little purpose except to destroy the indigenous vegetation that has been here for hundreds of thousands of years. And when they destroy those native plant communities, it's not just the plants, it's all the animals that depend on those plants. The butterflies, the birds, the mammals, they all will disappear. So this is, anybody know where this is? That's a tough one. This is Parnassus and Cole Street in Cole Valley. So this is Laguna Seca, S-E-C-A, meaning dry lake. And I found this photograph in the granddaughter of William Ferdinand Lang's photo album. Emily Zaretsky, who I tracked down. She was in her 80s. This was her grandfather, William Ferdinand Lang, was one of the first settlers of what became the Haight-Ashbury, and he settled here in 1870. And this is the Lang Dairy, and this lake was part of his dairy, where his cattle would drink water. And it would, during the rainy season, it would flow down into where the Panhandle is, and then all the way down to Mission Bay. In the background, we can see the powerhouse. This picture was taken in 1893, so this was the last year of the Lang Dairy. UCSF would be up here today. This is the metropolitan powerhouse that supplied power to the second electric streetcar line in San Francisco. The first electric streetcar was the Juice Line that had a powerhouse right at Monterey Boulevard and Circular Street. And over here, these houses are on Carl Street. They still stand today. And way in the background, you can see Strawberry Hill and Golden Gate Park with Sweeney's Observatory on the summit. That's 1893. And now this is a bird's eye view looking down on Lake Merced and Laguna Porca, which is now Pine Lake in Stern Grove. Both of the water that comes to both of these sites mainly comes from the aquifer in the western part of San Francisco. But there were also creeks that came down Brotherhood Way, which was originally Stanley Drive, Trucadero Creek that ran through Stern Grove and created that deep gully. This is an aerial photograph by Gabriel Moulin in 1928 showing the same view with Lake Merced, Eucalyptus Drive, Lowell High School would be built right there, Sloat Boulevard, and you recognize Flyshacker Pool, 1,000 feet long. I used to swim there as a kid. It was just an amazing place. Of course, you had to wait for a hot day, which was rare and far between, but on hot days, that place was jumping. And it was demolished and turned into a parking lot, mainly, for the zoo. This is a photograph showing Laguna Porca, which means pig lake, hog lake. It's also been called mud lake, out in Stern Grove, the western part of Stern Grove, as it looked in 1903. About this much remains today. And the reason that the water has dissipated is because of cemeteries and golf courses taking water from the western aquifer. They are supposed to not do that anymore, and so the water level is beginning to rise slowly. All of these trees were planted not by Adolf Sutro, but by the Green family, who came and settled as squatters in what became Stern Grove, and they fled Ireland during the Great Potato Famine of 1848 and came to San Francisco. And they got into the tree planting business. Sutro wanted to hire them to plant his trees, but the price was too much, and so he did it himself. These are some of the Parkside boys hanging out at Laguna Porca in 1903. I mean, this is where we used to hang out as kids. You know, we'd drink our first beer, smoke our first joint down in the Grove, get in fights, you know, get rowdy, break bottles. I mean, we had no environmental consciousness. Now, this is in the Presidio, and we're looking at Lobos Creek Valley in 1918, and Lobos Creek still supplying drinking water to the Presidio. It goes through a purification plant, and then it flows, the overflow goes on to Baker Beach. This is right next to where Ansel Adams grew up as a little boy, and he would take his little box camera and take photographs of the sand dunes. A lot of restoration has taken place in Lobos Creek Valley. So it was sand dunes and then planted with trees and buildings put in, and then reconverted back into sand dunes. And here's a close-up of Lobos Creek flowing down past the oak trees, heading for Baker Beach. Now, in the old days, Lobos Creek supplied water to San Francisco. Well, here are some kids from George Washington High School doing habitat restoration next to Lobos Creek with the National Park Service. Lobos Creek, the water was exploited by the Lobos Creek Water Company, and they built a redwood flume all the way from Baker Beach, all the way around the Golden Gate, all the way through the Cow Hollow District, all the way to Black Point, this is Fort Mason, right to the foot of Van Ness, and then the water would go to this pumping station where Ghirardelli Square is today. Those are the pioneer woolen mills in the background that made Civil War uniforms, part of what is now Ghirardelli Square, and then the water was pumped up to the top of Russian Hill to supply water for anybody who wanted to buy water from the private water company. This is Mission Creek flowing through the center of the Mission District in the 1860s. And this is Twin Peaks, Corona Heights, Mount Sutro, right here would be Mission Dolores, and that water is still there. It's in a culvert underground. But when the 1906 earthquake struck, if you built a house or an apartment building on top of a high water table, you were destined to have some very bad damage to your building. This is the Valencia Street Hotel, which was a 4-story building. They were having parties that night, and it collapsed, crushing people inside. As many as 70 people died in that one building. And they couldn't even get them out as the fire was approaching. And the story has it in the newspaper that the Army put revolvers on sticks and stuck it into the ruins of the people who were still trapped in the apartment building, they said, we've got to split, man, because the fire's coming. So it's your choice. You either burn alive or you shoot yourself. I don't know how factual that is, but that was in the newspaper. And this is looking down to what is now Dolores Park, which was the Jewish cemetery. So this would be Church and Church and 19th Street, right about here. And here's downtown, and this is an artist's glorification of what Dolores Lagoon may have looked like. We think that it wasn't quite that big. Here's a photograph of the same location, of the Jewish cemetery at Dolores Park. And get that dog on a leash. Oh, sorry. So you can see the same mausoleums as in the photograph. And all of this would burn in 1906. Here's Potrero Hill in the background. Yeah. Potrero Hill, by the way, is serpentine. Serpentine stretches diagonally across the center of San Francisco, from the Presidio to Lone Mountain to DuBose and Market to Potrero Hill to Hunters Point. That is a serpentine band, the official rock of the state of California. And here's Dolores Park, Mission Park, it was just being converted into a park at the time of the 1906 earthquake. And you can see the fire burning San Francisco and the original Mission High School. This Mission High School would survive the fire of 1906, only to burn in 1923. But everybody's retreating back into Dolores Park as the fire is approaching. All of this would burn, but the other side of Dolores would remain intact. But look at the size of that fire. That's pretty scary. So San Francisco at that time had a population of 450,000, And after the earthquake and fire, 250,000 were homeless. And the theme as the fire was approaching was eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may have to move to Oakland. Here's another creek. This is Islayas Creek flowing through Glen Canyon Park. It's still there today, still flowing nicely. A lot of habitat restoration has been done by the Natural Resources Division of Rec and Park. Thank you, Christopher.
Yeah.
Pushing back the willow trees, getting rid of the blackberry, the Himalayan blackberry. And this is a field trip taking place in 1985. This is the way Islayas Creek looked flowing through Glen Canyon in 1892. And you can see there's no trees, a lot of long-petaled iris, people fishing along the shore. You could actually drown in Islayas Creek in those days. O'Shaughnessy Boulevard would be up here, and this is a pumping station that pumped water probably up and over Portola Drive and then down into the Castro, into Eureka Valley, where Nobby Clark had his waterworks, where Nobby Clark's Folly is at Caselli and Douglas today. So here's that same pumping station as it looked in 1892. The whole valley is covered with Douglas iris. And way in the background you can see the Gum Tree Ranch, which is where downtown Glen Park is today. Chenery and Diamond Street would be right in that eucalyptus grove. And here's the same view today. It's the recreation field. Now, Islayas Creek still flows underneath here in a culvert, in a storm drain. And here is that culvert being built, going right underneath Alamany Boulevard. When they built Alamany Boulevard, they put Islayas Creek into this culvert, and then it went all the way to San Francisco Bay. But then when they developed all the residential buildings, they hooked up the sewer system with that culvert. So not only do you have the creek, but you have unmentionables going into that culvert. San Francisco is one of the few cities that combines its sewer system and its storm drain system. Which means if we ever wanted to daylight Islayas Creek, we wanted to bring it back and create a wonderful wildlife corridor of fresh water that would help to make the world a paradise that it could be, we would first have to get rid of 280.
Yeah.
Then we'd have to get, well, no, let's not laugh. I remember when they built 280. You know, I mean, we walked along 280 when it was under construction. So, I mean, it's not that crucial. And then we would have to rebuild the sewer system as well. Up here is Silver Avenue and the old Simpson Bible College. And this is where Islayas Creek actually hit San Francisco Bay, where it went right, so you had fresh water meeting salt water, which is a rich, rich habitat. So we're standing on Bernal Heights, looking down onto where 280 and 101 meet today, and this would be McLaren Park in the background. You see that, Christopher?
Yep.
And so Farmers Market would be down here. I mean, you know, what have we done? Okay, this is the Tennessee Hollow watershed that's being restored by the National Park Service. Creeks that used to go through culverts have been daylighted in the Presidio and then revegetated with freshwater marsh plants and native plants in the Presidio. The Presidio is doing such great work. I'm so proud of them. These are the native trees of San Francisco. This is a California buckeye, one of the few indigenous California buckeyes that still survive. There were hundreds of them along San Francisco's original bay shore, but almost all of San Francisco's original bay shore has been destroyed. So this was the original bay shore, right where 22nd Pennsylvania are. So you got the Caltrain station down here. There's the tracks for Caltrain. And this Buckeye clings to the cliff down there. And it's a totally industrial area, but when I went over and took pictures of this many years ago, almost every blossom had a critter on it, either a butterfly or bees. It was just drawing them in like crazy. Now, we did a tour of the islands of San Francisco Bay many years ago, and this is one of the Marin Islands, which is covered with buckeye trees. And human beings are not allowed to go on this island. It's a wildlife sanctuary. And I'm sure you can recognize the familiar profile of Mount Tamalpais. And when we went past there, I said, oh my God, look at that. Those are plastic bags that have blown onto all those trees. How ugly. And this guy who was Art Feinstein of the Audubon Society, he said, Greg, those aren't plastic bags. Those are snowy egrets nesting. Whoa. You know, I'm a city boy. I mean, to me it looks like plastic bags. But those are all snowy egrets nesting. It's just amazing just imagine what the Bay Area used to be like.
Which island is that?
One of the Marin Islands. There's 2 Marin Islands.
Does that have a name?
There's Marin Island number 1.
Oh,
Marin
okay,
two.
all right.
I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
One of them people can go onto and the other one they can't.
And the egrets are still there? They're still, there?
Sure.
Oh,
And this is a very famous buckeye that was actually planted at Willard North and McAllister. It was a big fight to save it, and is now one of the official landmark trees of the city and county of San Francisco. It's just 1 block from Golden Gate Park's Oak Woodland, and 1 block from the Jefferson Airplane House, if you know where that is. I'm a big airplane fan.
USF is just up the street.
Right. That's Willard North and McAllister. And this is one of the last of the indigenous laurel trees of San Francisco. This is behind, what God, I'm going blank. Notre Dame. Notre Dame just burned. Notre Dame School at 16th and Dolores Street. Right behind the school across the street. But Mission Creek was once called the Creek of the Little Laurel Trees. So it makes sense that this is one of the little laurels that's growing very big. And now we're going to talk about the most prominent of the native trees of San Francisco. These are coastline oak trees that you see growing here behind the Conservatory of Flowers, just after the Conservatory of Flowers was completed in 1879. These are native oak trees. There's still some question about whether these trees were planted or are indigenous. But there are some trees down there, the big mama tree that's well over 200 years old near Arguello and Fulton is just enormous and had to have been indigenous. But when William Hammond Hall first planted trees in Golden Gate Park, starting in 1872, he was the first superintendent. He designed the park. Most people think it was John McLaren. It was William Hammond Hall. And William Hammond Hall's philosophy was that every name in Golden Gate Park would be a naturalistic name. Nothing would be named after people. Well, that changed real quickly. Now everything's named after people. But you had the Deer Glen, Peacock Paddock. Here we have the Oak Woodland. We used to have the Oak Woodland Trail, and now it's the Phil Arnold Trail. But I like Phil Arnold. But these are all native oak trees. Lone Mountain in the background with Oddfellows Cemetery. This is a little dark, but it shows the oak woodland where it's a lot of habitat restoration has taken place there. A lot of non-native trees have been removed to allow the oaks to thrive. And it's one of the lesser known areas of Golden Gate Park. It's the, Conservatory Drive, just go right behind the conservatory. And it's a very peaceful, beautiful site with lots of birds. I mean, it's funny, most people go to Golden Gate Park and they want to go to the buildings. They want to go to the Young Museum or the Academy of Science, or go to play ping pong at the tennis clubhouse. Check out the outdoors in Golden Gate Park too. And this is what is now the AIDS Grove, which was in 1899, when this picture was taken, was the Deer Glen, although these are elk. But it was called the Deer Glen, and you can see coast live oak growing right out of the sand dunes of the western part of the AIDS Grove today. They're still there today. And I believe that sudden oak death syndrome was found in one of these trees. That is what I heard.
Yes.
Okay. And here's a view from the top of Strawberry Hill looking at Golden Gate Park with oak trees at the summit. There are a lot of oak trees at the top of Strawberry Hill. We're looking across to the Richmond District and the newly planted trees of Golden Gate Park around 1885. Now, if we look at, speaking of Golden Gate Park, this is a book that I have on the birds of Golden Gate Park. And this was published in 1930. The most prominent bird in Golden Gate Park was quail. Quail ran all over the place in Golden Gate Park. Even when I was a kid, we used to see quail running all over. And then they seemed to recede into just the native garden at Striping Arboretum. The native plant garden designed by Arthur Menzies, the grandfather of Gavin Newsom. But if you're going to see quail in San Francisco, you're either going to see, there may be one or two still in the Presidio, and maybe one or two near the Menzies garden, but they pretty much disappeared because of the destruction of their habitat. Feral cats. I feed 2 feral cats in Golden Gate Park myself. Bad, bad, bad. I know, I can't help it. I love those guys. But anyway, they've pretty much disappeared. Speaking of Golden Gate Park, this is the park nursery as it looked in 1920. This is where John McLaren raised the plants for the entire park system. And over here you can see the emergency aid hospital, which is now where the Natural Resource Division of the Recreation and Park Department has its offices over on Stanion near Beulah and Frederick Street. You want to see the same spot today? This is Golden Gate Park. I have testified numerous times to the Rec and Park Commission showing these photographs saying, are you proud of this? I mean, this could be soccer fields. It could be, I don't even care if it's artificial grass. Let's make it something other than a goddamn parking lot. And the people who mainly park here are UCSF or people shopping at Amoeba. Now, I shop at Amoeba all the time. But the fact is, this is, people don't even realize this is Golden Gate Park. How can we treat Golden Gate Park like this? Why? Because it generates about $400,000 a year for Rec and Park. Well, if that's the case, let's pave over all of Golden Gate Park, make the whole thing a parking lot. And Rec and Park would make millions of dollars. It just disgusts me. And yet, on the other hand, when I was a kid, I'd wait for the 49ers to arrive in buses and get autographs right there. Yeah, I know, I'm a hypocrite, right? We're going to talk about the non-native trees of San Francisco. This is another photograph that I got from Emily Zaretsky, the granddaughter of William Ferdinand Lang, that was in her photo album, looking at the Lang Dairy. This photo showing the bullpen. No, that's not a relief pitcher warming up. That's the bull at the bullpen of the Lang Dairy. And we're looking up to Mount Sutro. This house is still on Parnassus near Stanton Street. It's been converted into 4 units. But these are Sutro saplings that he planted, which was, he planted eucalyptus, pine, cypress, and acacia trees. And why did he plant them? Well, there was the potential for lumbering, for eucalyptus trees in Australia are used for railroad ties. Of course, there's over 400 species of eucalyptus in Australia. Tasmanian blue gum, Eucalyptus globulus, does not make good railroad ties. But anyway, he planted trees that created jobs for the city's unemployed. The city's school children would go out and plant trees. Here we are looking across the inner sunset to Mount Sutro as from Strawberry Hill. And the trees are being planted on Mount Sutro. And here's the dense Sutro forest as it looked in 1934. I mean, it's very picturesque from a distance. But what happened to all the native plants that were there? And then here's more of Sutro's planting all the way to Ocean Avenue. So he planted all the way from Parnassus Avenue all the way to Ocean Avenue. There's the Ingleside Racetrack, Ocean Avenue right here. City College would be right here. This is 1912. And here's the same view in 1985. So most of the trees that were on private property were clear cut to make way for residential development. Those trees that are on public land, if you go and look at this is the extreme case, but this is what happens when you plant trees in a native plant community that are not indigenous to the site, and what happens is rapidly the native plants are shaded out. The moisture from the fog, it just drips off of the trees, and all of this non-native ivy grows. The ivy came from people's gardens where birds would eat the seed and shed it all over the place. And then the ivy begins to spread and eventually climbs up the trees, and the trees cannot photosynthesize and the trees die. So this is the extreme case. So what you have here, we used to have 100 native plants supporting thousands of different native critters. Now you have ivy, none of which comes from San Francisco, and non-native trees. It's called a biological wasteland. So what has been happening is volunteers have battled to try to restore these areas. The Sutro stewards are doing it up on Mount Sutro. UCSF just created a management plan for Mount Sutro, which, get this, includes the replanting of eucalyptus trees. Unbelievable. The great University of California. But, you know, they have to keep everybody happy because a lot of people love eucalyptus. Eucalyptus are big, native plants are small. This is an indigenous eucalyptus forest in Australia. Looks quite different from this. Now, the problem tree in Australia is Monterey pine from California. And this is the Presidio before trees were planted, but if you look very closely, you can see the first eucalyptus way back there being planted by Major Jones. This is all serpentine grassland, one of the rarest native plant communities in California. And here are the trees being planted near the Presidio Avenue entrance, and they planted them in regiment, just like soldiers lining up for inspection.
Yeah.
And these eucalyptus are still there, but of course, most of the native plants have disappeared under the eucalyptus trees. This is about 1883. And these are cypress trees that were planted above Baker Beach. And as you can see, there's absolutely nothing living underneath them. And these trees are all dying of old age. But it's part of what has been termed the historic forest of the Presidio. So most likely this area will be replanted with Monterey cypress. Whoa, I lost something there. Let me see if we're... Oh, cool. Hang on with that. Oh, okay, so before the Presidio became a national park, the Army agreed to remove some of the pine trees that were threatening this very rare plant, the Presidio or Raven manzanita, which was the last of its species above in the western part of the Presidio. We don't tell you where it is. Discovered by Peter Raven many years ago. By the way, the Arctostaphylos franciscana, of course, which was supposed to have been extinct in the wild, was rediscovered, one specimen, when they were redoing Doyle Drive, and it was moved to a secret spot in the Presidio. And here's Fort Point. We're going to talk about the Bay Shore of San Francisco. This is Fort Point. This is looking at Crissy Field before the Panama Pacific Exposition. So this is about 1885. You can see some tidal marsh here, saltwater marsh. And this is Crissy Field in the 1950s when it was an airfield for aircraft. And all of that was created with fill for the Panama Pacific Exposition. And most of the debris came from the ruins of San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake. And here's Crissy Field today, where a tidal marsh was recreated. A lot of the money came from mitigation money from the airport because they had destroyed some of their tidal marshes. So they had to mitigate some of the damage. Also, a lot of private money came in. So this is a recreation of a tidal marsh. There were some technical mistakes, like the water didn't recede out at low tide. But this is a whole new technology, recreating tidal marshes.
But when they made that marsh, they knew they were making it too small, but there was a whole group of people that wanted to keep the airstrip land intact.
Well, there's still the possibility that expansion will take place, mainly where the lawn is. The lawn is way too big.
Right.
And of course, we've got more fresh water coming in from Tennessee Hollow. And we're going to have that new park on top of the tunnel.
Right.
But anyway, the wildlife don't seem to mind. At low tide, the snowy egrets and the marsh birds go in there and they eat crustaceans and mollusks and crabs. And here in this picture, you can look down on Crissy Field and you can see the tidal sloughs at high tide, where at high tide the saltwater bay water comes inland and then recedes back at low tide. This is one of the only parts of San Francisco's original Bay Shore that still exists today. There's a little bit at Hunters Point, but this is Black Point, Fort Mason. This area has never been destroyed. So this rocky cliff, although most of the vegetation is exotic vegetation, this rocky cliff is an idea of what much of San Francisco's shoreline may have looked like, where there were not tidal marshes. And that's the Jeremiah O'Brien Liberty ship in the background. This is Yerba Buena Cove. Originally, San Francisco, the village was named after Yerba Buena. Montgomery Street was the original Embarcadero. And so probably 3/4 of a mile of fill has filled in this Yerba Buena Cove. San Francisco's original name was Full. I guess I didn't. Where's that Yerba Buena? Oh, well, anyway. I had a picture of Yerba Buena, the native plant that was originally San Francisco's name. San Francisco was named for Yerba Buena, a native plant. This is Mission Bay, as it looked in 1868, with Potrero Hill sticking way out into the bay as a peninsula. Here it is in the 1890s, still existing, being filled in with lots of garbage. Potrero Hill. And this is an interesting part of San Francisco Bay, and this is Heron's Head, which is shaped like a heron's head, Pier 98, which was landfill. They dumped all this debris into the bay in anticipation of a possible southern crossing or another pier for unloading material from overseas. But tidal action washed a lot of pickleweed onto the site, and slowly but surely nature reclaimed this site. And it became a habitat for 130 shorebirds. And now it's managed by volunteers and paid staff at Heron's Head Park. This is Bayview Hill, sticking way out into San Francisco Bay. Yosemite Channel, this is 1934. And you can see pickleweed tidal marsh right down in here. Now Candlestick Park would be built over here. This would become the Candlestick Park parking lot. Candlestick Park is gone, so this is mostly going to become housing and commercial. But Bayview Hill, about this much was cut away. And a lot of this Key Avenue comes up here. Bayview Hill is one of the most glorious remnants of San Francisco's original landscape, even though all of this has been butchered away. We'll talk about some of the natural areas of San Francisco very quickly. This is Twin Peaks as it looked in 1900 from 20th and Noe Streets to the Spanish and to the Californios. The Spanish-speaking, it was called Las Pecos de la Choca, which meant the breasts of the Indian maiden. Here's Twin Peaks as it looked in 1940. So you have Noe Peak and Eureka Peak to coincide with the valleys down below. Clipper Street now goes right up here. That's the reason this photograph was taken by the Department of Public Works in anticipation of building Clipper Street. This is looking from Twin Peaks north, looking across this grassland, going all the way down to Coal Valley, the Panhandle, Golden Gate Park. This is 1915. None of this survives today. This is all residential development. This is looking from this is just above Corbett Street. And you can see Douglas Iris and long-petaled iris here. Looking down to the view, this is Castro and Market. This is where the mint would be built. This is serpentine rock that used to go all the way across like that. And they had to use explosives to extend Market Street past Dolores. It was called the Dolores Cut. Here's the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts posing up on Twin Peaks in 1926. That's Mark Hopkins under construction, looking down Market Street. This is the photo that I took during the East Bay Hills firestorm in 1991 from Twin Peaks. These are some of the wildflowers that still exist on Twin Peaks: Pearly Everlasting and Lizard Tail, right above Burnett Street. We go in there and try to pull Himalayan blackberry and poison oak out of there. This is a western garter snake, not the endangered San Francisco garter snake up on Twin Peaks. It's a roadkill, I hate to tell you.
Aw.
But I posed it so it looked pretty good. I know it's terrible. I didn't run it over, I don't have a car. Up on Twin Peaks, we have Lupinus albifron, which is the prime larval food plant for the federally endangered mission blue butterfly, which also uses 3 other lupins for its larval food plant. And the Natural Areas Program, I'm going to say Natural Areas Program because that's what the name of it was for many years. The Natural Resource Division has reintroduced many mission blue caterpillars.
Adult
Eggs.
butterflies, the butterfly itself.
To Twin Peaks to reestablish the habitat. And up on Twin Peaks, we have, this just shows you what happens. This is where that Pearly Everlasting and Lizard Tail is located above Burnett Street. And this is all French broom invading. So what do? We have to go out there and physically remove French broom with weed wrenches. And these, all these guys are super old people. And Jake Sig here is like the guru of the native plant movement here in the Bay Area. And he's 91 years old, and he's out there pulling weeds. Of course, he was taken 20 years ago. Mount Davidson, the tallest natural point in San Francisco, as it looks today from Diamond Heights. Here's the same view in 1928. It says Mariluna Park. This is the reservoir that still exists on Agua Street off of Teresita. And here's the way Mount Davidson looked before the trees were planted, when you still had grazing animals, predominantly domestic grazing animals that would eat everything down to the ground. Horses, cattle, goats. And Sutro would plant trees right up to this point right here. Here's the view from the summit of Mount Davidson at 928 feet in 1924, Twin Peaks. This is the unforested part of Mount Davidson, the north side, showing California huckleberry, the red-colored plant. The only place where California huckleberry occurs in San Francisco is the upper and lower slopes of Mount Davidson, because it also occurs a little bit above O'Shaughnessy Boulevard, which would actually be the lower slopes of Mount Davidson. But we call, at least I call it a huckleberry scrub community. This is one of the richest native plant communities in San Francisco. If you have spare time, walk on the north side of Mount Davidson and look at the difference between the eucalyptus forest or plantation and the natural areas. This is also on the north side of Mount Davidson, Nootka reedgrass that grows almost chest high in certain parts. It ranges from Nootka, Alaska to almost Monterey. This is Glen Canyon as it looked in 1942 from Dorothy Erskine Park. Here's Glen Canyon with Columbine Incline Diamond Heights in 1942, the creek, Islas Creek flowing through the canyon. And then Diamond Heights was declared a blight area because nothing was there except native plants. So it was redeveloped and covered with houses. I would like to see the roofs of these houses collect the water so the water would flow back down into the canyon. Wouldn't that be nice instead of going into the sewer system? So again, here's the comparison, 1942 and today. Even the arroyo willows have spread like gangbusters because they spread not through rushing water, but through mud. And so as Islas Creek has diminished and become muddy and less rushing water, the arroyo willows, which are a native tree, have expanded all the way out into the grassland. Oh, here's a hike going through Glen Canyon. And so we're looking at the canyon. It's very huge. And up here is O'Shaughnessy Hollow, which we had to fight to save, which was acquired with open space funds many years ago. This is Department of Public Works property, and over here is Hetch Hetchy property. This is Mount Davidson. Bernal Hill, Bernal Heights, as it looked in 1936. Bernal Heights Boulevard has now been closed off to automobiles, which is a great thing. I'd like to see the same thing happen to Twin Peaks Boulevard. A portion of it has been closed off to automobiles, but I'd like to see the whole thing closed off. I doubt that's going to happen in the near future. Tourism. And up on Bernal, you can see in the spring, footsteps of spring, Lamatium, Johnny Jump Ups. McLaren Park, the second largest park in the Recon Park system at 313 acres. Still has a lot of native plants. This is John McLaren hoisting the American flag in McLaren Park. He ran the entire park system from 1890 until his death in 1943. And there's not one woman in this picture. And in McLaren Park, we have this wonderful display of Viola pedunculata, Johnny Jump Ups, which is the larval food plant for the Calliope silver spot butterfly, a federally endangered species, and there's Bayview Hill in the background. So this is the far eastern side of McLaren Park. This is Corona Heights above the Randall Museum, as it looked in 1985. A wonderful grassland and wonderful rock formations. Great place to hang out. And then the Randall Museum, very educational for kids. Corona means crown, probably named for the crown of Chert Rock at the summit. This is a view of Corona Heights from Castro Street in 1901 with the Gray Brothers Brick Factory under construction. They quarried the side of Corona Heights, the south side. These are the Castro cable cars running from the ferry building all the way to Noe Valley. What a tourist attraction they would be today. They were eliminated in 1941. And this is out of a family album showing a family posing in Eureka Valley with the brick factory, the Gray Brothers Brick Factory under construction and smoking black in the background. This is Buena Vista Park, the view from Buena Vista Park in 1902 with the old City Hall waiting to be destroyed in the 1906 earthquake. A lot of oak trees in Buena Vista Park. Here's the view from Buena Vista Park during the fire after the 1906 earthquake. The billowing white fire is the Ham and Eggs fire in Hayes Valley. It had a distinct white color to it, probably because of the type of Victorian redwoods that were burning. Who knows? We're looking to Hawk Hill, one of our natural areas right here, as it looked around 1901. This is the intersection of Ocean Avenue and Juniper Serra. So here's Ocean, here's Juniper Serra. Commodore Sloat School would be right here. West Portal around the bend. And Hawk Hill right there. Here's Hawk Hill with the Twin Peaks Tunnel under construction. And here's Hawk Hill 10 years after the Twin Peaks Tunnel opened. And look at all the housing that was constructed because streetcars could reach all the way to downtown. So we're looking there and there. This is Tank Hill as it looks today at Twin Peaks and Clarendon. The eucalyptus were planted to conceal the water tank from Japanese planes that were probably going to bomb the coast. After all, they just bombed Pearl Harbor. The Japanese are probably not going to bomb San Francisco in the near future. So the eucalyptus has served their purpose, right? We can get rid of them. No, that's not going to happen. So here's Tank Hill in 1914. No eucalyptus trees. In the background, we can see Mount Olympus with San Francisco's Statue of Liberty at the summit, Buena Vista Park, Corona Heights, and there again is the Gray Brothers Brick Factory. I was involved in the fight to save Tank Hill, and it totally changed my life. I managed Tank Hill as a volunteer for over 35 years. And it was very spiritually rewarding. I had a true relationship with Tank Hill. I mean, I looked at her as a beautiful piece of Mother Earth, and I became a very spiritual person because of that. Get very emotional thinking of Tank Hill. I no longer take care of Tank Hill because I don't live in the neighborhood anymore. I've had heart surgery. I can't make it up that hill anymore. So it's up to the Natural Resources Division to manage Tank Hill. Go get it, Christopher. Here's Tank Hill with gold fields all over it. This area has been, I'm sure, has now been trampled into oblivion. But I used to put barriers up to keep people from trampling this area. This is Billy Goat Hill at 30th and Castro as it looked in 1914. This is another Gray Brothers quarry. One of the Gray Brothers was shot and killed by an irate employee there. That ended the quarrying operation. This is part of Diamond Heights in the background. Here's the same spot today. Beautiful architecture up there, isn't it? Now we're looking to City College, the site where City College would be constructed. This is where the science building would be built. This was the site of the Ingleside Jail. The county jail was located on this hill. This is Miramar and Monterey Boulevard in 1932. And here is the jail, and there's the guard. And you just expect Humphrey Bogart and George Raft to be escaping in one of those buses. But in the background, we can see what we call the Judson Prairie, with the eucalyptus trees still there. And this is an area, a little grassland area that was donated to City College under the stipulation that the site would never be built on. Well, there's still some native plants on this site. This is the only place in the Sunnyside district, other than Dorothy Erskine Park and a small little section up on Merced Heights, where native plants still occur in the Sunnyside district. And we would like to see the biology department and the horticulture department work together to try to restore this slope by propagating the appropriate native plants. And battling the oxalis and the Earharta. It could be an outdoor classroom, and it could lead to the possibility that students getting stimulated by this type of work could then get a bachelor's degree in conservation biology from San Francisco State University. And my God, there's going to be so many jobs available in conservation biology. Because if we don't save the planet, nothing will matter. So habitat restoration, conservation biology is becoming the in thing. It's happening all over the world. This is the San Francisco Conservation Corps working above Baker Beach, removing ice plant in one of the earlier habitat restoration projects by the National Park Service.
What year was that, Ray?
It's probably about 1992.
Okay.
And this is the nursery for the Natural Resources Division of the Natural Areas, of the Natural Resource Division of the Rec and Park Department, growing site-specific native plants from seed at their nursery in Golden Gate Park. So without the native plants, we lose the native critters, like the newt, or the brown pelican. And we're welcoming coyotes who have now reappeared in San Francisco, so that's kind of a good sign, even though they have killed a few dogs and cats. Sorry about that. They better not get my cats. And remember when the sea lions, the California sea lions returned to Pier 39 after Loma Prieta earthquake. The owners of Pier 39 were very upset about this because these are luxury mooring piers where yachts pay rent to Pier 39 to moor there. And so you couldn't interfere with marine mammals. That's a federal law. You can't interfere with these guys. And so Pier 39 was losing money. So what happened is the press would go down and interview the sea lions and ask them what they were doing here. They say there's a lot of food to eat in the bay. We're really happy about it. And people came from all over the world to see the sea lions. It became ecotourism. And people bought dinners and lunch at Pier 39 and generated money for Pier 39. And Pier 39 said, don't get rid of those sea lions. They are making lots of money, and they erected a statue of a sea lion at Pier 39. Thank you for your time. Lights. So, on the table, I think we have some maps showing the different natural areas of San Francisco. If you didn't pick one up at Christopher's lecture, we got some here for your enjoyment. They sell for between $5 and $10, so it's a bonus.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, I'm really hard of hearing because I photographed every rock concert, conventional rock and roll photos online. And I was on submarines, so I had ear squeezes. But most things I don't want to hear anymore. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer.